Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest today is Don Sklenka, SVP of AI Optimization at Claritas, and one of the rare operators who's lived at the intersection of creative, media, and machine intelligence long before AI became a buzzword on every deck. I don't know if that means he's old. I don't think so. With nearly 25 years in digital marketing, Don built his foundation inside global agency powerhouses like Publicis and Dentsu, leading omni-channel strategies for Fortune 500 brands across retail, CPG, automotive, and healthcare. We're talking production, UX, media, dynamic creative optimization, performance. He's been in the trenches, not just those strategy rooms. Today at Claritas, Don is scaling patented AI solutions that turn data into decisions and campaigns into performance engines. Real-time optimization, predictive analytics, smarter creative, better outcomes, less noise, more signal. Finally, yes, he's a lifelong Cleveland sports fan, which tells you everything you need to know about his resilience and commitment to the long game. Don Sklenka, welcome to the show.
I feel like we could just, stop the podcast there. Like, you gave everything that everyone needed to hear about me, talked about the Cleveland, sports fans. I think that's it. Like, the podcast is over. We're good. We're good to go.
Thanks for coming. Drive safely.
Right, that guy sounded great. I don't need to know anything more.
He's your best guess ever, Steve.
Sadly, Cleveland sports is an indication of loyalty and, like you said, resilience, because there's not much that we get to hang our hat on, but when we do, we really do.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I want to start with one of the topics that I'm interested in. That's agentic AI moving from demos, no shortage of those, to real deployment. So everybody's showing AI demos right now. But talk to us about who's actually using this in the real world, and what does real deployment even look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, how do we define agentic, and what is how is that affecting different businesses? So when we talk about agentic AI, it's you typing in a prompt and then having what is effectively a chatbot doing the work for you. So not just giving you a response, but actually going and executing that work. So part of the agentic process is setting up work streams and setting up APIs and integrations that, when I want to buy a flight or something as simple as that, I can type in what I want to do, and then the agent will actually go and execute it. So I think what you're seeing more often than not today is the demo of that. So businesses or whatever you want to call that, are demoing an agentic solution within a ChatGPT or within a Gemini. And, it looks great, but then the actual real life application is what is now the next level that we got to get to. So, I think you're starting to see bits and pieces of that agentic process being integrated when we talk about advertising. So thinking about analysis, for instance. So analysis in a ChatGPT is, let me know what is your best ad, hit enter, and then it looks at data and gives you the answer. It's not really agentic. Whereas agentic integrated into a dashboard would say, okay, we're going to literally look across every single data signal, look across every single creative. We are going to replicate a process of analysis, looking at that 3,000 permutations. Then we're going to spit out not only the recommendations, but also what is the next best creative, and use a generative AI solution to then produce that creative and then allow humans to approve it. Like, that would be moving from, an LLM to agentic. Mm-hmm. So, that's where I think the industry is moving towards more and more, is away from the LLMs and more into the agentic. It's a bit of an integration process, because it's more than just simply, I've got ChatGPT, let me add it. I mean, there's, all the hundreds and thousands of permutations that you've got to think about. Your system is different than the ChatGPT system, the different coding, different language, QAing, you don't want hallucinations, so there's a lot that you have to do versus just simply a demo. So, people will go on stage and show a demo, but, getting that integrated is a big difference.
Yeah. And You bring up a really good point about the evolution. Is that the right word from
Yeah.
LLM to agentic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like the industry evolution, and then like how is AI evolving? 3 years ago, no one really even heard agentic. It was simply just a chatbot. Now you're hearing agentic. So there's the industry evolution of simply AI, and then there's like spokes off of that. Like how are we as a Claritas company, using that evolution to our advantage? So there's both of those things. So there's the industry evolution, and then there's like within each business, how's each business evolving? So that's a long-winded response to that comment.
No. I know for a fact, or I talk to CMOs all the time, and my gut is telling me there's a reticence or a reluctance or even an ignorance in the right context of what exactly is the difference and what should I be doing. Yeah, I use ChatGPT. Isn't that enough? And what would you say to a CMO who's like, my team uses chat. What else should I be doing? And I'm asking you to answer a very vague question, agnostic of industry or anything. But if a CMO is listening to this saying, what do I do when it comes to agentic? What should be my first, what should I start with?
I would start with, what is your problem? So what is it that you're trying to solve? Is it that your team is too slow? Is that you're paying too much? Is that you're not getting enough of an output? Those are three main issues that I think AI is trying to solve for. So speed, efficiency, and cost. Those are the first main items. And then agentic becomes, do I need to actually integrate a solution into whatever that business is, or can I continue to use external tools and get to the same point? So
Yeah.
I'm not here saying that you've got to have agentic, and agentic has got to be built in and integrated. I think you would have to weigh the downsides or upsides of both. And is it producing the output that you're expecting? So is your team using it efficiently? Are they taking the recommendations that you're getting into the chat and actually applying them? If the answer is yes, and that's positive. If the answer is no, then maybe an agentic approach where the issue is that humans are still slow. So you get all this output in the LLM, but if the humans are still slow to apply that output, then that's a bottleneck. So in this instance, you want to remove the bottleneck, which an agentic approach should remove bottlenecks that says, okay, this is the process. You apply it here, you analyze it here, you then make the adjustment here, and then a human in the loop is giving the approval versus an LLM is here's the analysis, and the human's got to go and what does that mean? And what do I do with that recommendation? And then apply it. So I think it's a matter of, are you seeing the bottlenecks? Is the
Yeah.
bottleneck still a human in the loop? And then, are you getting more efficient? Are you getting cost reduced? Are you getting that as output? So I'm not trying to use buzzwords just for the sake of it, but I really do think that that's where it's at. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? And then, are the humans in the loop still preventing that problem from being fully solved?
Yeah, exactly. Listen, we could devote this whole time just to that discussion of agentic versus LLM for sure. But I want to move on to something I know you're passionate about, and that's what you've called the real competitive battleground, which is identity, privacy, and measurement. And the real competitive background, as I think you've defined it. And I want to start with, how is AI changing attribution and measurement compared to the old school way?
It's basically, yeah, it's a good segue from where we just were at. So speed, efficiency, and cost. So, what typically would take, weeks to analyze, hundreds of thousands of rows of data, that can now happen immediately, within seconds. So, that's the biggest output is simply, getting the data, understanding what's working, what's not, in seconds versus weeks. So that should, depending on your view, speed the cycle up or reduce significant cycles, depending on how you want to view that. And so who has now the fastest tool, but then the flip side of that is the most accurate tool.
Mm,
So AI should help you to become more accurate, meaning that in certain areas where you would have to have a more general approach to measurement, the size of the finite circle, if you will, should get smaller and smaller, which means that you're going to have more data to analyze. So the smaller circle, more data to analyze, and now AI should help you to analyze that quicker, and then ultimately it should make you much more accurate in the approach. So I think that's part of it. And then you mentioned, privacy. Privacy is also part of data. So like, who owns the data that you are analyzing? How much data is PII versus IP address versus user agent, things like that. So like there are fine lines between what is PII and not. That will also impact. So the businesses or advertisers that own more of their data can then obviously do more analysis of the data that they own versus outside, data providers may not own that data. So the PII line moves left or right because of that. So I think that's where AI is really coming into play is speed and efficiency, analyzing more data quickly or more accurate data in a short period of time.
I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up, the old school way, which of those of us like you and I who've done this for more than 30 seconds, there has always been that battle of attribution, right? Meaning, no, the social media team, we get credit for that sale. No,
Right.
we get credit for that sale. Is it too much of an oversimplification to say AI is going to eliminate all of those battles?
Oh, I definitely don't think it's going to eliminate the battles. It's probably gonna make the lines blurred a bit more,
Mm,
which may actually increase some battles. I mean, exactly to your point. When you're working in the Google ecosystem and you're running campaigns that have Google Ads, I mean, it's obvious that they're gonna weigh Google Ads more than you have an outside DSP. I mean, it's just that's a very obvious element to it. Now, AI isn't necessarily going to solve that in particular, but if you're using AI as an independent measurement, it should be able to look across way more data signals and then provide, again, a more clear, independent view of measurement.
mm.
But you're still going to have the same battles. You're still going to have people that are buying search ads versus meta ads versus display ads versus CTV ads. Everyone's going to try to, say that their program is the best or their media campaign is the best. AI is going to make cases for everyone
Yeah.
by looking at more data, but I think you're still going to have those battles for a while. I mean, the hope is that it does get a little bit more realistic. I'm not entirely sure AI is going to solve for it, but the idea that just look at the display space. The display space is very cheap inventory. You get a significant amount of impressions compared to like a CTV inventory. The idea is the same. You are likely not clicking on ads. 99% of display ads are never clicked on anyways. CTV ads, you're not really clicking on a CTV ad, a little bit of a controller. So they're kind of the same space. A CPM for CTV is $30. A CPM for display is $2, $3, $4.
Right.
So, when you look at the display ad and the user scrolling on their article that they're reading and they scroll past the display ad, they've now viewed that display ad similarly to viewing a CTV spot. But what often happens is that view in the display ad gets kind of thrown out. Well, that display ad, I viewed it, but I didn't. And we can show that you converted on a view, but it gets thrown out for some reason. Whereas a CTV ad, everything is view. You view a CTV spot and then you go and convert. Well, that seems to be accepted. So, I think again, AI isn't necessarily going to solve for that, but the idea is if AI can help analyze more data, more signals, it can present a better and a fairer story for the different channels. That would be, that's ideal. And that's what, we are, part of our solutions at Claritas is measurement related. We are an independent measurement provider. We see that same story, but it's not really on us to make the decision. We present the data of which AI is helping, but it's just a matter of telling a more complete story than it is about removing social did this and my claim that social did this or my claim that CTV did that.
Right.
That will probably still exist for at least a handful of years.
Yeah, I think it's way too easy and quite honestly lazy in your analogy before of going, well, the display ad's not working. CTV's working. I'll just put all my money in CTV. Well, hold on.
Right.
No, the display ad may be working. You just can't measure that per se.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just like historically, there's been a perception of okay, well, CTV is the new kid on the block. It's a high CPM, therefore it's gotta work. So you almost like become preordained. I have nothing against CTV by anyways.
Yeah.
Like it's preordained as well. It's worth that $30 CPM. Whereas I could get 100 more impressions for the same dollar with display, and it's going to do the same thing. You're going to see an ad, and you're not going to click, and that sort of thing. So I think it's just because it's been around forever, it kind of keeps getting pushed aside. You have influencer marketing that's now probably ahead of CTV, and that's the new thing. Everyone's going influencer, but I think that the idea is still the same. Like the cost of the media, and the return you get on it, everything is still about the same. So the return is a 1% conversion rate, and then once you get to a website, it's another 1% conversion rate to do what you need to do. So that conversion rate has kind of been tried and true, regardless of channel that's seeing the ad.
Right. Now, CTV used to be just about reach, right? Now people are talking performance.
That's
So
right.
what's happened? What changed?
Yeah. So, what's funny is that pre COVID, there was this desire in the CTV space of using what is called a QR code. Oh my God, what's a QR code? That's craziness. We're never going to use a QR code and scan our phones watching an ad. Then COVID happened and it became like the new thing because every diner that you went
Mhm.
to, you would have to use a QR code. So it became a natural thing with your phone. And so what benefited, interestingly enough, is the CTV area, so that when you're watching a ad, you now have a device or a mechanism of which you can then click through, you can then engage, you can then interact. So when you're watching a CTV ad, there's now direct interactions that it's not that they weren't possible pre-COVID, it's now that the end user is used to picking up their phone when they're on the couch and scanning that QR code. It just wasn't something that was top of mind, or that's something that people wanted to do or used to doing. So I think that is part of it. Like, that user experience in the CTV space has significantly changed. Therefore, in the CTV media, more and more advertisers are able to directly correlate not only reach and frequency, but also engagement. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it, again, is, measurement companies, being like a Claritas, I have to pitch us a little bit on this, but measurement companies like us, we are able to understand the IP address or the device that the user is on when they're watching that CTV spot. And then, if we have the end result pixeled, for instance, we're able to understand that this person not only saw the ad on a CTV device, but then on their phone, because they're within the same network and converted, we can apply that conversion. So we are helping the CTV industry, which previously, you didn't understand what happened after
Right.
a ad was viewed. Now we're connecting dots to say, okay, after an ad is viewed, the user did X, Y, and Z. So that's improving the performance of that ad. And then, that applies to all channels. But, that's, I think, between the two of those things, that's what has really helped the CTV space is interaction, user experience, and then, the ability to measure beyond just reach and frequency. Those have really worked in parallel to each other.
What about live events like sports? What should brands almost rethink when it comes to sports and CTV?
I think it's that engagement, that engagement factor. So you have the ability to take signals from the game itself or from the match or whatever it is that you're watching, take those signals and have it impact the ad that you are seeing. So on our end, we take a variety of signals. And again, rather than a human trying to make a decision in a very linear decision tree, it is Monday at 9 a.m., serve this creative. The idea is actually letting AI identify hundreds of thousands of permutations of signals. So you are looking at a device in a certain market and you're watching a certain type of TV show and the context is ABC, therefore change the creative to XYZ. And then, think about that over 40 to 50 million impressions. There's a significant amount of permutations. In the old world, we used that word earlier, in the old world, it wasn't possible to calculate and then have a decision with all of those impressions. Even dynamic creative or DCO, it was a preordained decision. Whereas in the AI space, now you're able to do that. You're able to truly have a decision for every single impression based on hundreds and hundreds of different data signals. And then the output is going to be unique to that individual. And it'll change. So you may see one ad during an Eagles game, and it's going to be, a completely different ad and experience when you're watching the Grammys. That's something that you just could not keep up with in the old world, whether that was a human decision or even dynamic creative. Now with AI, that is something that is now possible and we're able to do.
Yeah. Let's put your future hat on when it comes to AI and creative.
So for the most part, when we are talking about AI and creative, we are leveraging someone else's technology. So we're leveraging OpenAI, you're leveraging Gemini, you're leveraging Claude, something like that. So for the most part, not 99% of advertisers or agencies or companies that are talking about generative AI are using someone else's models. So we'll start there. It's very few where you are like, there's companies that are truly building their own generative AI models when it comes to that. We got to be inefficient. So starting at that point, if you looked at where the generative AI models were 6 months ago, or you look at where they were 2 years ago, the evolution within those models has been unbelievable. unbelievable. Even the biggest update was, I'm sure folks that are listening to this know what I'm talking about, where you would ask even ChatGPT or OpenAI to create an ad, and the copy would never be in English. It would be like a garbled mess of things that look like they could be words, but they're not really words. Now you produce the same prompt, or you type in the same prompt, and the production is night and day. It's literally not only you're getting English words, but the words are within a font that is the same exact style guide that the initial brand has. And that was, a 6-month period of evolution. So the hard part about answering the question is that it goes back to perception. So the perception is hard to change when a brand engaged with generative AI a year ago and you saw the output and it was a disaster. And so therefore, everything going forward is going to be the same disaster, where it's not really true. It's an evolution. So the hard part is changing that perception. So we still, on the Claritas side, suffer, even though we're not generating ads in real time. We still suffer from that initial perception where generative AI was hallucinating and creating these ridiculous outputs. And so then all of a sudden, legal and compliance at every brand, like everyone stood up and said, okay, if you have the word AI in your solution, we've got to go through this rigorous testing protocol and understanding all the output, even though it has nothing to do with generative AI. So like one nugget of a bad experience has created this perception in the industry that's really hard to overcome. The reality is that it's getting significantly better. So like, again, if you put in a prompt that said, generate an ad and you give a style guide, some previous examples, it's going to be pretty close to what you're producing today, maybe even with some tweaks. Again, another long-winded answer to your question, where are we going?
Yeah.
I think the models are going to be at a point here within the next 6 months or a year where it's going to be very, very, very difficult to tell the difference between an AI produced flat ad. I'll keep it flat for now. So a static ad, so that could be a Facebook, Meta, TikTok, Instagram display, whatever that may be. Tell the difference between a flat ad and that's human produced and a flat ad that's generative AI produced. So that is happening now. I would say, again, within 6 to 12 months. The hard part is that perception. Will the industry start following and say, okay, yeah, we understand that it wasn't what it was at 2 years ago. Can you put the parameters to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate, that sort of thing? So I think that's the next step, is changing that perception. You're going to see, I think, a lot of the output of the Super Bowl ads that's video based. There's going to be a lot of AI uses in that. And I think the Super Bowl it's the king of advertising, the pinnacle. And from the Super Bowl, then everyone starts like changing perception. So I think, we'll see what happens after the Super Bowl. But the idea that you're going to see more and more AI based ads is going to start loosening the brand and industry a bit when it comes to the perception of generative AI, which is then only going to increase the speed of which now more advertising is going to use it. So I think that's the biggest thing. So I would say within 12 to 18 months, I would be hard pressed for any brand to not be leveraging generative AI in a always on fashion in their advertising.
Wow.
It's going to become rocket speed. And it's a very obvious equation. The equation is going to be, how much am I spending for a team of 42 creative designers and copywriters to produce this output that is X? And then how many people am I using to produce this output that is Y? And then does this perform just as well as that? And if the answer starts becoming yes, it's truly just a matter of time. And I think that's where this is heading. So again, sorry, I know it's a long-winded answer.
No.
Just kind of give a little bit of perception and context is key.
And by the way, for those listening, we are recording this about 3 or 4 days before the Super Bowl, which is why.
So I don't know who's going to win this. Maybe I'll predict it. Man, that Seahawks, that was a great game that they played there.
You heard it.
Yeah, we'll see who wins, but wow.
We are recording this on February 3rd, so his prediction is...
Daniel Head had a monster game. Wow, that was amazing. Did you see those catches he had?
Anyway, back to what you were saying, there's multiple schools of thought. One being, if I'm a copywriter, which I was in my career, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job, and a designer. But the other side of that is that we all fall into, which are the consumer side. And if I'm a consumer, which we all are, again, going, are we going to be like marketed to as just like robots, and we're not going to have any personality in our communications with brands? Now, I'm being hyperbolic for a reason, but I'm going to that extreme for a reason, right? Because I can see some people, the doomsayers, going, oh my God, he's telling me in 12 to 18 months, that means like in a couple of years, there's not going to be anything personalized anymore.
Yeah, so my answer, I'll answer both of those. So on the jobs part, so I've used this same statement at panels. Said it at Cannes this year, and I said it last year. It's the same mentality needs to be. There's one point in time in our lives when you would make a calculation and you'd use a calculator to make that calculation, and then all of a sudden this crazy program called Microsoft Excel came out, and it allowed you to automate and create 10,000 calculations in the same amount of time. Now the job didn't go away. The end user, either A, the end user decided to not figure out how to use Excel anymore, and so they hired someone different that did, or B, the end user evolved and decided to use Excel because that made their job more efficient. And I think that's the same approach that's going to happen here. It's that there's still going to be humans that are going to be generating the need and the prompt and what the AI is going to produce and the tweaks of that output, but you as a human in the loop producing a single spot versus producing 100 is going to be kind of the difference. So your cost to output is going to be significantly higher than it was before. Or again, your job may be at risk if you don't evolve. And so the statement that I made at a panel this summer was, evolve or die. Like that's kind of how this is going to become. So either you can keep pushing against this monster weight that's coming or evolve with it. And so that's where I think from a personalization perspective, actually it's going to enable something that we've always stated we wanted to do. It's always been out there. It's always been like the headline statement in any pitch for whether it's an agency pitching a brand or a tech company pitching an agency, whatever that may be, the pitch was always right place, right time, right message. That was it. The idea of personalization so that you get your ad that has your content and I get my ad that has my content. But the problem with that statement was there was always a lack of creative production. So the ability to continue to have hundreds of thousands of permutations of creative was mind-blowing. There's no one that could keep up with that output and that cost. Now you could effectively have hundreds of thousands of output that can match hundreds of thousands of impressions or millions of impressions. And it could become feasible to have a one-to-one where everyone actually would have a very, very specific ad that is actually designed for you emotionally and data-wise and your location and everything, like beyond just like a variable in an ad. The entire experience could effectively be for you. And that's what this is going to enable. So the ability to have many, many permutations, you're still going to need humans in the loop to come up with that because you got to come up with a strategy and understanding all the millions of people in your ad campaign and how they're going to receive the ads. That's going to be the expectation. So AI is going to enable that, just like Excel is. The expectation is that, you can add 62 columns in a matter of seconds. You're not going to take a calculator. So the expectation should change. The user should evolve, and then the output is going to be drastically more efficient.
I love that analogy. I'm going to steal that, just so you know.
I steal things all the time.
If you have it copywritten, you can sue me. But I'm looking at the time. I want to wind down. What a great conversation, by the way. And I definitely want to have a part 2, but I got to get this before we check out. I got to get your thoughts on the shifting from brand to aging technology with AI integrations and all that. I have 2 questions. What should CMOs start demanding operative from their agencies now that AI is baked into pretty much everything?
What was the second? Is there a second question? Or
there is a second question.
Okay, so what should brands start demanding of their?
What should CMOs or brands start demanding? I picked that word on purpose, from their agencies, or expecting from their agencies now that AI, like, it's there, it's everywhere. It's no longer the elephant. We all know.
Yeah. I mean, it's all great segues from what we're talking about. So efficiency and output. So, you can literally look at your scope of work. My agency friends are just going to kill me, but like,
I'll take the blame.
I mean, but as a brand or an agency, as a brand or CMO, you can look at your scope of work, say from 2023. What was the price tag and what was the output of that scope of work? And what's going to end up happening is you're going to say, okay, in 2025 or 2026, that price tag probably should stay the same, but my output, the expectation is going to be 2x or 3x or 4x that.
Yep.
I think that's probably the easiest answer to that. Is, again, like, you don't need to literally see the AI output. Like, you don't need to see the prompts. You don't need to see how you're doing it. But if the expectation is that they are using AI, then the expectation should be significant efficiencies with significantly more output. And if they're not, then that's fine. But like it'll come in some way, shape, or form because their margins will go down or whatever that may be. So like that's how I would look at it if I was a CMO. So kind of compare your scope of works, and you should expect a significantly higher efficiency going forward.
Okay, last question. If you're advising a brand or a CMO, is there anything you think they should absolutely or really think about building in-house versus leaning on partners for?
Well, I think it goes back to their data. It depends on how much data they own or have. Going to be different brands that are going to have, like you take a retailer, whatever, like an Albertsons or a Kroger or something like that. The amount of data that they have is going to be significantly different than the amount of data that another like singular focused, maybe like an insurance company may have or something like that. So I think building models off of your data would be something that I think is worth exploring to bring in house, meaning that you don't want to use a ChatGPT model potentially for your own data. You may want to build and have your own brain, I use that term, or nervous system, if you will, attached to your own data. And then from there, if you think about that as your hub, the spokes internally then can take your own data and do much more with it. You can then distribute that data in a different way to your agencies. You can distribute that data differently to your customers. You can distribute that data differently to your prospects. So I think building different models off of that, your own data. I can't believe, I would be hard pressed if it's not already happening, but I would say that would be my main focus is like the data that I own is gold as a brand. How do I do more with that data? Building specific models to me and to my needs versus using a third party or off the shelf. That would probably make the most sense.
Wow. The time flew, which always means it's a great conversation. Don Sklenka.
That means I just spoke a lot.
One of the two. Well, either that, I don't know, but we'll go with the former. Don Sklenka, SVP of AI Optimization at Claritas, and sorry to say, long-suffering Cleveland sports fan. Thank you, my friend, for being a guest.
Thanks, and hopefully the next podcast will have the Browns will have won more than 4 games, so we'll see.
Deal. Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends, and if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.